Disclaimer. Although no vulgar language was used in this video, the lack of profanities is well compensated for by the absolute futility of its content.
Singing helps me relax. Maybe you ought to try it.
I don't sing, and I don't relax. This is the way I am, and I like it. I also like a little silence.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. Hello. Because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping. And the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence.
All right, we filmed this at night, the way we like it. We're night owls. We have Mr. Tony Cutler.
I remain silent.
You remain silent. Tonight, as usual, we will do our very best to remain at least south of proper as we attempt to talk about the imperative subject of silence.
All right.
All right, tonight we're going to be talking about this kind of oxymoronic, if that's a word. It's an oxymoron, but we're going to be talking about the imperative subject of silence. I think the first place we need to go to, the first place where I used to go to when I was a child in Argentina, and I would say to my grandmother, what is this? What will be the answer? Go where? The dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the dictionary. We had this big book, and it was.
I thought you wanted to hear silence. No.
Every child. That would be great. It's funny, we're going to be talking about silence, and we're not going to be hearing too much of it. Perhaps from Tony. Maybe, we'll see. But the dictionary is the first place we're going to. And the definition of silence, it is a noun, is the absence of any noise or sound, stillness, the state or fact of being silent, muteness, absence or omission of mention, comment, or expressed concern. I'm getting the feeling that the dictionary goes from oversimplistic to too complex. There's no in between. Today, once again, we're going to help the dictionary, all right? And, you know, I was talking to my grandmother. She's a literature professor. She is very wise and quite a unique character. Actually, this video is dedicated to her. And I sent her a message via WhatsApp, and I said, Grandma, what is silence? What works of literature will kind of talk about silence? She said, there are not too many works of literature that talk about silence, but silence is a negative value. It is the absence of something, right? That's all right. When we have something that eludes definition, and not many people talk about, we need to go back to philosophy. And that's the place that we like to go to next. When it comes to philosophy, I want to talk about a main dude, a main character, Plato. We've all heard of Plato. If you haven't heard of Plato, I don't know what to tell you. You're beyond help, you know. And I'm going to read some of the stuff that I found online to make it basic. His occupation was philosopher and mathematician. If Plato, that means that if Plato was to live in these days, he will be broke. The other reason that makes him very well known is that he was a student of Socrates. And he was responsible for little that we know about Socrates. You know, he was the guy who wrote about what Socrates said. And also he was the teacher to Aristotle. So he wasn't a big deal, right? Right in the middle. And in 399 before Christ, I'm looking at this stuff now, Socrates was executed. And the reason he was executed, Plato's teacher, was because he didn't want to acknowledge the gods in Athens. And back then, of course, it was paganism. They adored
a lot of gods.
a lot of gods. Socrates said, the hell with that. I don't believe in any of them. I don't want to worship anybody. And so he was sent to be killed for an execution. At the very end, before the execution, they give him a trial. It's a big mistake. Let me stop there and say, you don't want to give somebody like Socrates the chance to speak for himself. He represented himself. I will say this, if I was in any time of trouble and I could choose anybody from history, I will have Socrates defend me more so than any lawyer, because the guy was amazing, right? Simply amazing. And there's a book about that. You can research it. Google it, I guess. But Plato was his student and he was fascinated with their conversations. He wrote a great deal. Plato was perhaps best known for the book, The Republic. And he is responsible for the establishment of Western philosophy. He started an academy and he taught a lot of people. You know, he was mysterious. They know that he had 2 brothers and a sister. He died when he was 80 years old. Tony, where are you right now as far as your age?
Same as Plato.
Same. Okay, so you outlived Plato.
Same as Plato, 80.
80. Okay, so you outlived him so far. If you make it to 81, you can say, in your birthday celebration, you can say, today I celebrate the fact that I live 1 year longer than Plato.
Right.
Right?
I'm hoping that people do that.
That would be great.
Yeah, hopefully you didn't jinx it.
And he died in his sleep. That's what they say. So ideally, the same fortune will befall you, you know, because that would be probably one of the nicest ways of going, right? I can think of very few. Anyway. So it's an amazing character. And Plato said something that we and I were talking about earlier. His first quote about silence is, Weavy, you want to read it or you want to go ahead and...
Sure.
Go ahead.
Which is the one about the wise men?
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something.
Yeah. So wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools speak because they have to say something. Sometimes, okay, so I couldn't agree more. And, you know, I will start by saying that I love hearing the sound of my own voice. I even have a new microphone now to make it nicer. And I guess I'm a fool. But sometimes it's better if you don't say something. I will argue that it's always best if you don't say something. That which you say can only probably most likely work against you. But Plato was a complex writer. And if you research him on Google anywhere, you will see that he took a very structural approach to the understanding of silence. And he said a few things about it. The first thing he talked about was that the rhetoric is considered to be the art of using silence and talk. And it might not seem like much, but have you met somebody who only talks without pause?
Yeah, bad actors do that. They read the lines continually. They don't stop in between.
Right.
You can stop it. You can stop where the punctuation is, but you can stop in the middle anywhere you want. If you're thinking about something, the pauses are what's very interesting. More interesting than many times than what's actually being said.
Huh.
Absolutely. That pause could be the difference between someone paying attention and being pulled into a conversation. I mean, how many movie scenes have we seen like that?
Watch this. Speak the speech. I pray you. Instead of speak the speech, I pray you. Speak the speech, I pray you.
It adds a certain weight, a certain
As I
gravitas.
pronounce it trippingly on the tongue, I could never get the pronunciation of that correctly, and you used to get on my case. But the pause, the silence that you made in acting is fundamental, is also acting. That is also acting.
More acting because it's what's going underneath the words. The words are only part of it. And the silence adds to the situation at hand.
Correct. So we agree with Plato. The first thing he says, we are all in agreement, correct?
So far.
Absolutely.
All right. The other thing that he says is that silence is a distinguishing feature of a sacred place. You know, when you go to church, I don't want to offend anybody, you know, but when you go to church, the first thing you encounter is silence. And we are uncomfortable because we're social animals. We're not used to being in silence. When there's more than one person, we have to break it. If you're in an elevator, you know, Tony, you go in your building and then you go in an elevator and there's Weavy. And you have to go to the 20th floor. 20 floors going up or going down with another person. And then Weavy does something horrible to you. He's silent. At some point, you have to make some stupid comment. You have to at least talk about the weather. Even though you're in an elevator, you have no way of telling the weather. You say, oh, what a crazy weather. Huh? Weavy will say something equally idiotic like, huh, tell me about it.
Hey, it's hot today, right?
Yeah, you have to break the discomfort.
Why do you have to say anything?
Because we're not used to silence.
Well, or there are a lot of people that are very uncomfortable with silence.
Absolutely. I mean, silence is even weaponized in relationships. When your wife is upset at you, she's quiet. She doesn't say much. And you know she's upset. Usually you ask the next dumb question, which is, are you upset? Well, of course, she's not talking. The absence of speech means I'm really upset. You're probably doing something very stupid again. You know. But anyway, Plato says silence is the distinguishing feature of a sacred place and the condition for a mystery situation that causes anxiety or religious ecstasy, as well as divine speech. So let me break it down. Is the condition for a mystery situation in movies where there's a scene that is suspenseful, you hear silence, and that makes you very uncomfortable. Something is about to happen. Silence. My grandma, before she slapped me across the face when I did something stupid or bad or disrespectful, she makes silence. And then, pow! And it worked like a charm. She created mystery before the blow, right? Yeah. And then that's your reaction. And then Plato says it also creates the conditions for anxiety. Of course, you get anxious. If you're talking to me and all of a sudden I stop and I just listen and look at you, it makes people anxious. Why are you looking at me like that? I remember one time when I was in Argentina in first year of high school, we had this geography teacher who said, I don't want anyone to talk. And I want you to look at me when I talk. So the whole time we plotted to look at her, the whole class looking at her. We didn't take our eyes off of her. And she became increasingly uncomfortable. She said, I don't know what's going on, but we need to stop. And finally, Plato says, he creates divine speech, and religious ecstasy. You know, when the priest says, now we're going to do a moment of silence. And then he goes, let us pray. When he says, let us pray, I almost faint. I'm so happy that he broke silence. So uncomfortable.
Is that much of a change in the atmosphere?
Yeah. If there's a person in church who's comfortable with the silence, he needs to be in church. For sure. Now Plato talks about that. And then the silence means the reduction of the content of useless words. What do you think about that? I couldn't agree more.
That's very truthful. That's to the point. But you know one thing I really want to add about silence? Everyone knows silence. And silence has been known throughout the ages. At night, when people go to sleep, the cavemen, Plato and Aristotle, at some point in their lives, everyone can recognize and knows what silence is. And it's interesting because many times when people are by themselves, if they're that uncomfortable with silence, you've ever seen someone by themselves and they start singing to each other or talking to each other. So, and they just feel uncomfortable in their own skin with silence. But silence is something universal. Everyone experiences it at some point or another.
It doesn't matter what language you speak. Everybody speaks the same language when it comes to silence. If I spoke Chinese, you spoke Arabic, and you spoke English, we can be connected to silence.
You know, thoughts are like speech without sound, silence. Thoughts.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's an interesting topic, right?
Sometimes you'll actually speak out loud to yourself. They say you're crazy if you answer yourself.
Well, what I say to people when they say, "Are you talking to yourself?" I tell them, "Don't ever interrupt me when I'm talking to myself." How dare you? Yeah, so thoughts are, it's a means of silence.
Thoughts are a form of silence.
Well,
actually, that's interesting, because if you think about it, with thoughts, there isn't silence in our brain. We're kind of listening to our inner voice. However, to the outside world, it's absolutely silent.
In philosophy, to kind of close the idea of philosophy, silence is also seen as a part of human transgression. And we kind of touched on it. When somebody's upset, sometimes they go silent, particularly if the person is upset at you about something that they told you many times. So they choose silence. They're tired of telling you in 20 different ways, take off your shoes. So you walk home, you don't, you close the door, you say, hello, honey, you don't take off your shoes for the 50th time. She doesn't say anything. What's the point? She goes to silence. And then maybe you change. You say, in that silence, you try to interpret what the silence means. And then you take your shoes off. Because she didn't tell you to. She just gave you the silence. Now we go to enough of philosophy. People can research that on their own. We go to literature. And I think that's an area where Tony and I have kind of delved in the most, literature. The first thing I want to talk about in literature is a Polish poet, C.K. Norwid. He said, sometimes it is better to talk to silence than with a man. That is so much the case. On so many levels. Some people talk to kind of interrupt silence. Somebody once said, don't break silence unless you can improve it, right? And when you talk to somebody and they say, how are you? Well, it's Monday, yeah, Monday, right? Yeah, I know, I hear you. There's no content. It will be best if the person approached Tony and said, how's it going? And nothing more. No mention of the weather, no mention of the particular day of the week that we're in and why it's better than other days. No mention of the desire for the week to end. Scripted talk. Most of it.
Being polite, that's all. They're acknowledging the fact that you're there. They're not trying to give you any ideas about anything. They're not trying to comment, like you said, on the weather or anything. They're just acknowledging, hi there. How are you? You don't really want an answer. It's just a greeting.
Yeah. When you watch the Western films and you have the natives saying how. They say how.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It would be better. I think that would be much more suitable. Because then you don't have to answer how you're doing. You just say how, and that's it. Yeah. Imagine if you were somebody who's brutally honest. Anytime somebody asks you how you're doing, you give them a full answer that is detailed and accurate and honest. Well, one could say if you're in your 60s, you can say, well, I'm struggling with hemorrhoids. It really hurts. I don't know. I'm struggling financially. I'm recovering from bankruptcy. and you tell the person the answer to their question. You know, imagine that. So silence will be a great alternative. Anyway, this Polish poet says that sometimes it is better to talk to silence than with a man. The second one is Homer, who wrote the Iliad, the Odyssey. He was perhaps considered one of the first poets to ever live, right? And to be specific, I was looking this stuff on Google, and it's funny how specific they are. Somebody took the time to do that. I don't know if you ever read the Odyssey, but it's a pretty thick book. And somebody
Yeah, I read it back in, it's been a while, college. I had to read it in college, and that was I enjoyed it. I remember.
This is the Odyssey right here, for those of you who don't know. And this is a small version of it, right? But anyway, in the Odyssey, somebody took the time and said, and I will quote, "Whoever you are, if you're watching this, congratulations. God bless you for your time. The Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer contain 27,802 words, including 112 that relate to the context of silence. And yet all we could find is a quote of Homer in which he says, silence," this is going to give us so much trouble, "silence makes a woman more beautiful." There is no context in which this could go well for Homer, for you, Weavy, for you, Tony, or for myself.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch that one.
And so we're
at least not out loud.
No, please don't. Just refrain. We'll skip that one. In editing, that will go. And then I'm going to go to one of my favorite guys. I'm so happy to be able to mention him. He's fond to my heart. He is memory of high school. I reminisce my years in high school of learning English and learning the language of Mark Twain. You know, Samuel Clemens. Mark Twain said, "It is better to remain silent and be thought of a fool than to open one's mouth and remove all doubt." My hat's off. You know, it is better to remain silent and to be thought of as a fool than to open one's mouth and remove all doubt. Mark Twain.
Beautiful.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
That's sweet. That's a nice quote. I really like that one.
Yeah. Actually, it came out because I said Weavy before the show. I said, Weavy, why did you Google Mark Twain? Because he said in open mouth, flies don't go in open mouth, meaning shut your mouth and you won't swallow a fly. It's another way of saying keep silent. When in doubt, don't tell the truth. Just keep silent. But now you said, "Oh, here's a funny," and you started laughing. You know, the funny quote is, "It is better to remain silent and be thought of as a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt." So Mark Twain, like myself,
Here's the thing, though: if you remain silent in social situations, people may think that you're stupid, or they may think you don't have much of interest to say anything, and you have to not care about that, about what people are thinking. If you're quiet like that, certain people will say, "Well, he's very nice, he doesn't speak too much," but other people will say, "Well, they're not interested in this person. He doesn't seem to have anything on the ball." If you're that kind of a silent person, you can't care what other people think about you, because they're liable to think you don't know anything. And you got to say, "Well, I don't care if they think that."
Correct.
Well, you know what? I want to counter that one, Tony. I'm sure we all remember the saying, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all.
You can't handle the truth.
That's right.
All these roads are leading to the same place. The roads are leading to the idea that silence is a thing that we should use much more often. Yeah, it's a wonderful resource. Not utilized often, but it's a wonderful resource. One of my favorite quotes by Mafalda, who's an Argentine character from comic strips, is, "I love the sound some people make when they're quiet." Love it.
It's like the tree falling and the fruit falling in the forest.
Yeah.
Doesn't make a sound.
Doesn't make a sound. You know, and then to kind of continue down the road of literature and what literature says about the subject of silence, we're going to go into, we're going to do a segue into a very famous quote about silence. And I had to research this myself. The first example of this phrase was by an English writer by the name of Thomas Carlyle. He wrote a book in a magazine or a story called The Tailor Retailer. This book was written in 1833, and it was published in a magazine. And in it, he said, speech is silver, but silence is gold. You know, he started this whole premise that silence is golden. You're familiar with this, yes?
Very popular phrase. Who can forget? Silence is golden. Actually, I gotta admit, I don't think I've ever heard the first part about silver. I've always only heard silence is golden.
The second part.
Right. Yeah, and that's why we're always happy to educate ourselves and maybe share something of use with people. You know, when you're at dinner with people who are important, you can say, you know, the first part of that has to do with silver, and then you sound very intelligent. Or you can also keep silent at the dinner table, like Tony said.
But the school teacher says to the class, silence. Silence is golden. But without explaining what they mean.
Right.
Why is it golden? Why is it golden? Not explaining anything. They're just saying, be quiet. It's gold.
The other thing is that's spot on. Teachers always say, some teachers say that, and then they go on to talk. If silence is so golden, why don't you just shut the hell up?
Yeah, right.
Oh,
you know,
good point. Well, you know, even another point I want to add to that. I think you guys ever notice how silence is more cherished to older people?
Yes.
Silence is not cherished by the young. All they want to do is talk and make noise.
I think that's an amazing point, but also you're enticing me. I'm gonna write a book about this, because, you know, people, you can write a book about anything nowadays. You call it self-help and make a big deal out of anything. But there's the proverbial that we mention in every video. For some reason, the proverbial couple, old couple at Panera Bread. I went to Panera Bread with my wife, and we saw this couple, and they were silent the whole time. They did not exchange a word. So much so that when they ordered the food, the people knew them already, because older folks are creatures of habit, and silent. And they didn't find the need to contaminate me. And I started, my wife said, can you stop looking at them? I said, honey, they're saying nothing. They're not even making eye contact. They're just having lunch together in complete silence. And it's weird. And I realized later, when I was writing a happy anniversary card to my wife, what can you say that has not been said after 60 years? What can you say to your significant other after 60 years of being together? That hasn't been said. She knows you love her, otherwise she wouldn't be there. So you go to Panera Bread, you pay for her tab, and all you need is her presence. You don't need much. Words can only sound repetitious and annoying and artificial. The ultimate speech then becomes silence. That came out so nice, yeah.
Oh, that's a card right there, Bunny.
That is a card.
I think I agree with that. I mean, they still like to hear it. I love you. It's a nice feeling.
See,
even though you know you've heard it 1,000 times.
That would be great, Tony. You know, imagine you go to Panera Bread with Lynn when you're 90, and you've given each other so many cards and said so many nice things. And the whole time you go in there, you don't say a word. You just look at her. She looks at you. You may not, even better, not even look at each other. And you eat your Panera Bread soup, the onion, French onion soup they have. You don't exchange a single word. The lady knows you guys, so she's the same, the usual, and you nod your head politely. You sit down, you move the chair for Lynn, and Lynn sits down, and you don't say a word. You just eat your soup. And at the end, she looks at you and she says, I love you. And you leave. Watch how much more powerful that is than if you contaminated the rest with words.
Timing is everything.
Timing is everything, but silence helps a great deal. But silence is golden. And we're gonna kind of close today with an article that I found. And this whole discussion was meant to kind of lead us to this article. And I wanna see what you guys think about it, Tony and Weavy. Silence is golden. This article, I'm gonna try to figure out Team P26. Oh, that's a weird name. Okay. He wrote an article 2 years ago. You can find it on Google. if somebody wants to sue us for mentioning somebody else's article, they can take all my books, I guess, my guitar, the microphone. But it's titled 5 of the Most Solid and Remarkable Facts That Support the Idea That Silence is Golden. So one thing is that this guy says, Carlyle says this on his novel. But now science is saying there is evidence supporting this idea that silence is golden. And so the first supporting evidence that silence is golden is silence assists, helps in making better the brain's functions. Neurologists watching this should be all over this right now, researching how does silence help brain connections. And I'll also go ahead and read out loud. The first fact deals with the brain's normal activity of constantly internalizing and evaluating information. And yes, even when you're asleep, your brain is at work. Neuroscientists say that silence is vital for better brain function. It doesn't need an intervention in the form of noise. Your brain won't work at its full potential if it keeps hearing noises that could disturb it. That would be a great thing to say to our significant others, or for them to say to us. When you try to talk to your partner about something that is important, the person says, you know, your brain won't work at its full potential if it keeps hearing noises that could disturb it. You may sleep outside, but that would be great.
Well, when they say noises, are they talking about human speech?
It's human speech. Usually that's what noise is. With silence help, you tend to have better focus, alertness, memory skills, and attentiveness. We don't ever give it a rest from noise, from stimuli. The brain is always stimulated. Silence gives the brain rest. Because when you're asleep, it's not resting, it's still working. But when you're awake and in silence, for those of you meditation freaks out there, people who love to meditate, much love to you. It's great, it's working, it's helping your brain, keep doing it. Hopefully you're not listening to music while you're meditating because you'll be ruining the whole thing.
Absolutely. And you know what, to add to that, Juan, I actually, I like to Google things while we're talking about it. There was actually an article in Psychology Today. It was posted on April 21st, 2017. And look at the title of it. 10 Reasons Why Silence Really is Golden.
Yeah.
And it goes on, and I'm obviously not going to dive too deep into it, but anyone who wants to look it out, check it out. It's Psychology Today. The title is 10 Reasons Why Silence Really is Golden. Yeah. And let me just touch on 2 or 3. Apparently, silence can stimulate brain growth.
There you go, same thing.
Noise affects our stress levels, and found that silence can relieve tension. Just 2 minutes of silence. Silence is more relaxing to your body. Periods of silence enhance sleep and lessen insomnia. I mean, there's a lot of good information there, and it just backs up everything you were just saying.
Know, Psychology Today is a magazine that I subscribe to through other companies, and it's a sad equifinality to psychology. Psychology has increasingly watered down into very cheap methodologies and interventions that lack all substance or scaffolding of philosophy and whatnot. It's not what it used to be, and it's condensed to quick solutions. And that's what Psychology Today has become. It's sad, but it's true. Now, but it's great. They have this is what we're working on now. It's great. It makes great conversation for a podcast.
Right, and there's little nuggets of information that are useful. Obviously, you gotta take everything with a grain of salt.
Absolutely, but it has a lot of the same points that we're touching on here from this person's article. The second one is
the psychiatrist, and you're laying on the couch. The psychiatrist says nothing, but says, "Tell me about it," and they lay there quietly and silently. And why does the therapy work? The therapist is not saying anything. It's working because he's being quiet and creating a silent moment for a half an hour.
I came here today to tell you, in all seriousness, that I'm done. I did what you said. I gave it a lot of thought, and I decided that once and for all, it's over. truth is, this therapy is a jerk-off. You know it, and I know it.
I actually don't know it, but please continue.
It's a jerk-off.
Yes, you've said that.
Anyway, I was coming here to quit. Had it all planned out. But guess what?
That's why it works. He could be the stupidest therapist in the world, but it works because he's sitting there being quiet.
Yeah, yeah. I watched this Winnie the Pooh excerpt on YouTube once, and I can't find it now. But it was an owl sitting on a branch, and this hopping kangaroo, very annoying, very hyperactive hopping kangaroo, comes underneath the tree and starts telling the owl his problems. Says, "Well, this and that, blah blah blah," and the owl looks at the camera and goes, doesn't say a word. And then the kangaroo carries on telling the owl his problems, and the owl looks at the camera and goes. And then the kangaroo finally hops off and then stops halfway and says, "That's it. That is it. That is the answer." And looks at the owl and says, "Thank you so much. You've been so helpful once again." And the kangaroo keeps walking off. And then the camera goes to the owl. The owl goes. And I thought it was the funniest thing ever. So when you say that, it makes a lot of sense. If you suck as a clinician, at least be quiet. You know, and if you cannot be quiet, then you have to push yourself to be better in what you say. Somebody said, "Don't break silence unless you can improve it." No. Okay. The second thing that is a fact, according to this article, that supports the idea that silence is golden is that silence promotes objective thinking. Not only that, noise angers people. There's even a Mesopotamian legend that reveals the supreme deity Enlil went on a killing spree due to noise. Huh. Wow.
Never heard that one. What was that deity again?
Makes sense. The deity's name was Enlil, Enlil. She went on a killing spree. She was upset because they were making too much. Maybe she was taking a siesta.
Here's another example of where silence improves the brain ability to do stuff. Psycho-cybernetics, they talk about your brain has a natural goal-achieving mechanism. And instead of if you have a particular situation, a salesman trying to make a sale, a sports figure trying to perform in a sport, instead of figuring out all the details yourself, all you do is relax and picture the end result. And the end result, so this takes a little bit of silence. You sit back in a chair and you're very quiet, just picturing the end result, but not on how you're going to do it. No words, no thoughts, no nothing. Then when you get ready to do it, it's all there. The brain has been working behind the scenes.
Correct. It's being given an allowance to work through silence.
Silent. That's why it works. You know, the person who came up with this psychology said that your brain had a goal-achieving mechanism. That may be true, but the real reason behind it, now that you're bringing all this up, is that you're silent when you're sitting back, relaxing, picturing the end result. You're being quiet and silent. The brain is working subconsciously.
Yes, that silence opens up room for wonderful things to happen. If you are watching this, I hate to say this, but there should come no benefit to you from watching this. No, you probably would have just invested some time or wasted some time. But if you think that this is going to change you in any way, you're going to embrace silence. All of a sudden, you're wrong. Most likely, you won't. You will be betrayed by speech, which we refer to it here as noise. You know, this could be construed as noise also. But earlier on, before this video, you were talking about something, and I wrote it down for our conclusions, right? And you said something. I said, let me write it down as transgression. What was the example? Do you remember the example that you gave when you talked about silence? When two people, when somebody is really upsetting you through anything they say, every turn they take upsets you. it's best to be silent. Do not argue back. You know, they say something that you consider to be.
There's nothing to be gained by that kind of language back. I don't agree with you and try to refute what they say.
Yeah.
I think you're not going to convince them most likely anyway. You're just going to hear yourself talk.
Yeah.
You're better off to. Now you can have a certain kind of conversation with an open-minded person that you trust, and you can give them your opinion and why you don't agree with them. But in general, you come into contact with someone that's got an opinion about something you totally disagree. You're better off to be quiet and just listen and not comment back. There's nothing to be gained.
Right.
What's going to be gained? If you don't agree with them, that's okay. You already know that.
Yeah, maybe taking notes for your. You know.
Yeah, no, but I wanted to interject with a nice little quote here that I've been waiting for the moment to pounce on, which is there's another. I'm not sure he was I guess he was a philosopher, a Greek philosopher.
You guess?
Epictetus. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. But his quote was, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak."
Well, that's good too.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and then again, it seemed like the perfect time to bring that up.
You can't handle the truth.
Damn it, Weavy. That's great. That is great.
All right.
Why didn't you say that when we were talking about philosophy so we could stay in order? Anyway, who cares?
It didn't seem right. I was quiet at the time.
I will say, in all seriousness, and kind of to give some closure to today, Tony and I have a background in acting. Him from doing amazing things as an actor. Me from scratching the surface and doing ridiculing myself. But writing things and Tony acting them out. I write things and Tony acts them out. He's patient with me and he helped me to edit. But besides that, we always talked about silence. And you may not know this, Tony, but when I was dancing tango in Florida with a dear group of friends, the guy who ran the whole operation there, he said, watch them dance. And it was a group of people dancing in a circle. That's how you dance tango de salon. He said, what do you notice about all of them? I said, oh no. He said that there's no pause. They don't know how to stop. They don't understand that stopping on your tracks, the moment of being still, is also a move in tango. It's as valuable as moving. And then I talked to my grandmother, and she said, it's a negative value. It's the absence of something. Perhaps too often underutilized. You know, I don't subscribe to the news and all this nonsense, but it's difficult not to. And I think that one thing that we could all benefit from is if we were to be more silent. Overall, if we became a silent nation, and we promote the opposite so much, in 2 ways. We say, we have the freedom of speech, so we have to say something, even if you have nothing great to say. Even if what you're saying has no value, no merit, and no consideration for others. And so I want to talk, to kind of really put the lid on this, about a group of people, the type of person that I really try to avoid at all costs. Is the person who says, let me do the talking. Is the opposite of embracing silence. So the conclusion to this, first I want to thank you, Tony, for joining us. I want to, Weavy, as usual, you and I, brother. And I would like to invite you, Tony, to join us in other videos in the future.
Well, I could say thank you for inviting me in, but I'm not going to.
Good. And that's why we invite you. That's why we invite you.